Hello and welcome back for another Torah Tuesday. I'm Dr. Carmen Imes, Associate Professor of Old Testament at Biola University, and we are continuing our trek through Exodus, and we are right in the midst of the tabernacle instructions. Thanks for hanging with me. Some of you might have been frustrated at previous videos because what you were expecting is for me to talk about Jesus a lot in these videos and talk about the typological significance or symbolism of each part of the tabernacle. And I have not been doing that because my focus is on Exodus itself. But today I'm going to diverge from that just a little bit because we are talking about the veil and the screen that block entrance into the holy place, and I just can't help myself. Today we're going to connect this in with Jesus. So I'm going to begin by reading my translation of the Hebrew, starting in Exodus chapter 26, verse 31. You shall make a tapestry of blue, purple, crimson, and fine twisted linen, the work of a weaver skilled in multicolored designs. He shall make it with cherubim. You shall set it upon 4 pillars of acacia overlaid with gold, and their gold hooks, upon 4 bases of silver. You shall set the tapestry under the clasps of the dwelling, and you shall bring in there from the dwelling through the tapestry the chest of the covenant tablets. So the tapestry shall divide for you between the sacred and the most sacred place. You shall set the cover upon the chest of the covenant tablets in the most sacred place. You shall place the table outside the tapestry, and the menorah opposite the table upon the side of the dwelling toward Timon, while the table you shall set upon the side of Zaphon. You shall make a screen for the entrance of the tent of blue, purple, crimson, and fine twisted linen, a work of multicolored weaving. You shall make for the screen 5 pillars of acacia and overlay them with gold. Their hooks shall be gold, and you shall cast for them 5 bases of bronze. So that takes us to the end of chapter 26. The construction of the tent itself is finished now after this. Okay, so what do we need to know? The curtain that divides between the holy place or sacred place and most sacred place is called in Hebrew the parakeet. It's worth noting that the lid for the covenant chest with the cherubim on it is called a kaparet. And so parakeet and kaparet are like rhyming words. They have the same consonants rearranged. This tapestry was the most elaborate of all the curtains used in the tabernacle. Moses was to have it made of the finest dyed fibers, interwoven with cherubim. The Bible Bricks version of the tapestry looks like this. So we've talked about this before. We don't know exactly whether the cherubim would have been worked into the design as it was being woven or whether they would be embroidered on top of it after it was finished. But it would look something like this. With winged creatures that are guardians of sacred space. When Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden, God placed cherubim right at the entrance to the garden. And so it makes a lot of sense to have cherubim right at the entrance to God's holy presence in the tabernacle. They are the curtain, the tapestry is to be hung on hooks and suspended from these poles. So here are 4 acacia wood pillars that have been coated with gold, and you can see that there is a silver base for each of them. We don't know exactly how they were spaced out. You can see that the pillars are obscuring, in this example, the pillars are obscuring the design. So perhaps they weren't symmetrical. Perhaps there were more than 2 cherubim on the curtain. We don't really know. It's not clear whether the pillars would have started on the outside edges and then be equidistant from each other, or whether the tapestry would have been hung to the sides of the tent, like to these supports. So then the 4 could be closer to the middle, something like this. And again, we'll never know because the text is not clear about exactly what it should look like. What we do know is that the opening to the most sacred place would end up being 10 cubits by 10 cubits. We already know that the tent was 10 cubits tall. and we know that it should be 10 cubits wide. We talked in the previous video about how to achieve 10 cubits out of the instructions for the back side, the end of the tabernacle toward the sea. One thing that's really interesting about this section of the text, we can tell how important this object is by the number of verbs that appear in the text. And I got this insight from Dr. Gary Anderson from Notre Dame. He counted all the verbs, and it's quite striking. I should have invited you to notice as I was reading how many verbs there were in the instructions. You shall make, and you shall make, and you shall make. And there's an intensity of instruction, and the name of the parakeet or tapestry appears 4 times in a single paragraph. So there's this like, pay attention, this matters. In contrast to that, when we get to the outer courtyard of the tabernacle next week, there's only one verb to describe the entire outer perimeter. And you shall make, and then it just goes on with verbless clauses, just describing like bits and parts rather than the intensity of human involvement. So that's something you can watch for as you're reading the tabernacle instructions. How many verbs are there, and what does that tell us about how important this piece of the whole apparatus is to the overall design? A shorter set of instructions concern the screen for the entrance to the tent, which we can see right here. And you can see that there are cherubim on this screen. That is actually a mistake in the Bible Bricks sanctuary design, because the text is clear that there are cherubim on the inner tapestry, but not on the outer screen to the tent. So this tapestry is placed right here. I can't do it quite right because I put it on a base to show you. So that will subdivide the tent into a cubic section. The most sacred place is 10 cubits by 10 cubits by 10 cubits. So it's a cube. And this is significant because the only other place in the Bible where we have a cube, I believe there's a part of Noah's Ark that might be cubic, but then the only other place is in the New Jerusalem, when the New Jerusalem is coming out of heaven, coming down out of heaven, and John sees it in his vision. It is as long as it is wide and as it is high. It's a cubic city, which indicates, I think Greg Beale makes a really excellent case that this indicates that the holy, sacred presence of God that began, that was symbolized in this cubic, most sacred place of the tabernacle, has now expanded to encompass the entire creation, so that all the earth is now the holy presence of God. We see a hint of this in Zechariah chapter 14, which talks about there not being any Gentiles anymore because everybody belongs. And it's not that they're all killed, it's that they're all incorporated, and that even the bells on the horses are marked holy to Yahweh, which is what it's going to say on the high priest's medallion on his forehead. So this is, I think, exciting to just pay attention to the dimensions and notice that the biblical story is beginning with God's presence in a small area, like this is where we meet with God. But by the end of the story, that sacred space has expanded to encompass everything and everyone who's still there. Now, as I mentioned, the screen that marks the entrance to the dwelling is not made at the same level of workmanship. So it has the same materials. It's got the blue, purple, and red threads that are interwoven with white linen. But there are no cherubim on that screen. It's not choshev, which is the method of workmanship for the tapestry. It's rokem, which is a multicolored design without pictures in it. So it's multicolored, but it's not as elaborate. And why this matters is that we can see a gradual progression as you go towards the holy presence of God. You're getting closer and closer to sacred space. You get more elaborate metals, more elaborate fabrics, more elaborate workmanship. There's more gold. There's restricted access. Fewer people are allowed to go there. And so we're seeing, like, as the closer we get to the hot spot of God's presence, the more it really matters that the people entering that space are authorized, prepared, consecrated, wearing the right clothing, in the right state in terms of ritual purity. So one interesting tidbit is that when they actually construct the tabernacle in chapter 36, verse 38, it indicates that only the heads of the pillars in the very front were overlaid with gold, not the entire pillar. So we have gold pillars inside with the tapestry, but we might just have wooden pillars here with the heads covered with gold. And the instructions for the screen only have 4 verbs in contrast to the 7 verbs used to describe the tapestry. So we even have an intensification of verbs the closer we get to God's presence. Access is limited to Aaron and his sons. Only Aaron and his sons can go in the tent. And so this lavish design of both of these, both the screen and the tapestry, indicate again that we're getting closer and closer to the presence of God. Now, I told you that I was going to talk about Jesus. The word, as I said, for the tapestry, I'm calling it the tapestry just to distinguish it from the curtain or screen to the tent. That word is parakeet in Hebrew. The Greek translation of it is katapetasma. And katapetasma appears usually, not exclusively, but almost always with regard to the curtains, these 2 curtains in the tabernacle. And when we get to the New Testament, the same word is used to talk about the veil in the temple that separates between the place where any priest can go and the place where the high priest goes, the most sacred place. Now, when they transitioned from tent to temple in the days of Solomon, this outer entrance stopped being a curtain, but they still had a tapestry inside to separate between the holy and most holy place. So it's very significant that Matthew, Mark, and Luke all describe the veil of the temple being torn from top to bottom at the moment when Jesus gives up his spirit on the cross, at the moment of his death. So Matthew 27:51, Mark 15:38, and Luke 23:45 all describe this veil as being torn. And then the author of Hebrews describes for us the significance of that moment. So as I've said, the closer you get to the most holy place, the more restricted the access is. And so in the tabernacle, only the high priest can go in the most holy place through that tapestry. And only once a year on the Day of Atonement, with a specially prescribed duty to sprinkle blood on the atonement cover of the chest. So this is a significant restriction that seems to be lifted at the moment when Christ dies. So Hebrews 6:19 talks about hope being the anchor of our soul and leads us through the tapestry, through the veil. And then in chapter 9:3, it describes that veil. And then in Hebrews 10:20, it indicates that Jesus opened the way through that veil by his death. So that the moment when Jesus died, the tapestry is torn as a way of symbolizing Christ has now gone in to the most holy place to sprinkle his own blood on the atonement cover. And he has done this once and for all. Now we all have access to the holy presence of God. We are no longer restricted. And so the New Testament makes a lot about the priesthood of all believers. On the day of Pentecost, the fire falls from heaven on the heads of those who are gathered to wait for the gift of God, which turns out to be the Holy Spirit. So the presence of God that will fall on this tabernacle on the day that it is inaugurated is now falling on believers. And in the book of Hebrews, we discover that believers now have full access to the very presence of God because of Jesus' death. So this is significant. And if we don't understand the tabernacle, we won't get how significant this is. We'll miss the importance of that moment of Jesus' death. So this is one reason why studying Exodus in more detail and looking at each part and the gradations of holiness and the method of construction can prepare us to better appreciate what Christ has done. I hope that is inspiring to you, and I hope you have a great week.